anytime that we have wetland soils on our particular site, it's worth more investigation. And so one of the things that I've mentioned a couple of times in class is that there is amazing information that was developed by the Natural Resource Conservation Service for a nationwide soils inventory. And so that information does exist out there, and it is absolutely possible, although more of an advanced user skill, to bring that into ArcMap and actually work with that data directly here. Because even amongst soil scientists, often the ArcMap version of the soil mapping, data is very, very complex. One of the things that the USDA has done is that they've funded something called the Web Soil Survey. This is the Web Soil Survey. And what it is that the Web Soil Survey, which I want you to go ahead and Google right now, just type in Web Soil Survey and go ahead and navigate to this particular website. And once you've arrived, I want you to click on the button that says Start the Web Soil Survey. Well, what this has done is that it's actually allowed us to, I'm going to clear my map real quick, it actually allows us to go ahead and bring in our shapefile that we just, this is the selection of our parcel that we did in one of the earlier steps. And so right here on the left-hand side, it asks you to define an area of interest. Now we can zoom in, we can actually come in here and we can define it by a rectangle or a polygon and click it out, and that's the easy way to go ahead and get this information. You see it's just like ArcMap as a viewer. I can zoom in and zoom out, I can do all kinds of things here. But if I want to just go ahead, I already have the shapefile, so why not use it? And so I want to set my area of interest. So what it's going to ask me to do is it asks me to set my area of interest. And remember, in a previous one, I created a folder called Memorial Park. Inside of Memorial Park, there is a file, and it says .shp, which is the shape file. And I'm going to click Open. And then it asks for a .shx file, and I'm going to go ahead and click Open. And then the projection file, which is a PRG, and I'm going to click Open. And then the DBF file, which is DBF file, and I'm going to click Open. And then I'm going to click Set Area of Interest. And you're going to see that right here on screen, my parcel boundary, that exact polygon now is projected accurately in my Web Soil Survey. So that's the quick way to do this, is to go ahead and bring it in. Like I said, you can, if you just want to go ahead and create a rough outline of your site, you can always do that. It's less accurate, but it's certainly possible. But the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go from area of interest, step 1, to soil map, step 2. And I'm curious what soils are on this particular site. And so you're going to see that number of acres, you can look at it here. Let's see. 50. Okay, this is acres in the area of interest, percent in the area of interest, Westland loam, shale, substratum. And if I want to know more about that, I can click on it, and it's going to give me the basic description of slope, the depth to restricted feature, which is how far down to the bedrock. So poorly drained. Right? More than half of this site is poorly drained. This is what I expected when I saw the wetland pop on here. The depth to water table, 0 to 12 inches. This starts to raise some interesting questions about where on this site should I be building different parts of my program. So WS, and you start to see that this part of the site is something to start paying attention to. The treed part of the site over here is in a silt loam, but it's also, represents a relatively small percentage of the site, but it is on a slightly, steeper slope, just like our elevation data was telling us a minute ago. Right, and so the great thing about the Web Soil Survey is it allows me to kind of click through this information. But again, we're not all soil scientists. And so one of the things it does is that it actually says, what can I do with the site? Suitability and limitations for use, right, is a good place to start looking at this. Right, building site development. So I can click the down arrow here, and I can start to look at, the appropriateness of, different types of dwellings, small commercial buildings. If I wanted to know small commercial buildings, and I hit, it's going to tell me that this site is extremely limited for small commercial structures, right? It's warning me that the soil ratings maps may not be valid at the scale. And basically what that's saying is it's a big disclaimer saying you need to hire your soil scientist and have somebody come out and evaluate the site. On the flip side, these maps are very accurate. They're used for agriculture on a regular basis. Something else we might be interested in on this particular site, since we're going to build fields on it, we might want to know its rating for lawns, landscaping, and golf fairways. So basically, where can we put turf? Same answers apply. This site has some challenges. It's important for us to, take a look at this and understand what the potential impacts on our site are. Anything that we do on the site is going to have to deal with the fact that that the soils are limited, they're poorly drained, right? That impacts the long term on this site. It'll probably impact our program layout. That's why we're coming in here and starting to look at it. There's even a tab for recreational development, and so picnic areas. So let's go in and look at picnic areas. Where is this site appropriate for picnicking? And again, we see the same thing showing up, right? How about playgrounds? And I bet we see the same thing showing up. Right, it's basically that we have very, very wet, very, very poorly drained soils. That's not surprising. This happens to be all the water flows this way. Like I said, it's a bathtub. Flows down from 218, down from the railroad tracks, and then ultimately is all draining to this upper, this really the northern corner of the site, is where all of that water is going out through that wetland, right? But this provides you with access to a lot of different information about different types. Right, and so you can even go in and start looking at vegetation, so how productive it might be. You can look at soil health measures and some other things, sanitary facilities, right? And so septic tanks, is something to start thinking about. How do we deal with, on this particular site? Let's view the ratings. It's not that we can't build on these sites, but I hit septic and the entire site is poorly suited for it. This is going to require a different solution. To be honest, some of this site, these features of this site are going to make it more expensive, and I think that's something worth noting as well. We're also going to want to supplement this with on-the-ground data. It's exactly what the warning that's on here says. I think it's important to consider, but this is something that Web Soil Survey is always going to be there and always going to be available for you to start looking into the particular as a starting point for everything on your site. Often we want to also understand the potential for erodibility, right? And so, there's a couple of different ways to start looking at that. I don't need to get into them here, but ultimately we can start to really dive into the soil structure, how likely it is to move downstream. All of these things are, certainly features. I was actually looking for depth of restrictive layer. So how far down do we have to dig if we want to put a structure in? And you're going to see that it pulls up here. And I should also make sure to show you that you can always bring up a legend. And in this particular case, I need to do some editing on my legend here, it looks like, real quick. The soil ratings, polygons. All right. Well, I can just drop down here and it'll tell me, right? Is that how far down is it, to get to those different things. Basically, I don't want to spend any more time on this, but I just want you to know this is out there as a resource. You're always going to have access to it. The Web Soil Survey is here. It's something that we can use for our site. It does allow you to go ahead and download the data from this point in time and bring it back in. And so you can move it back into GIS. Realistically, you can also go and turn off the background layer, or in most cases, what is even more common is that as we prepare our current conditions inventory and analysis, we're going to come in here, we're going to look at the dominant soil conditions. We don't necessarily always care about each individual distinction. We do care about their impact on overall program development and our ability to build on a site, and what parts of a site need to be protected, and special precautions taken to ensure that we're not eroding or putting erosion into our streams and water. And so keep that in mind as well. But again, another great resource out here. Please feel free to explore it further.